Hey there everyone, it's Scott once again and welcome to another video. This time I'm going to be talking about the fourth entry in the Rambo franchise, Rambo. And actually this is the first time I'm fully watching this film. I know it came out in theaters. I just, for some reason, never got around to seeing the film. I'm kind of kicking myself. Thankfully I got this Blu-ray for cheap. It looked pretty good, sounded pretty good. Got a good amount of extras on here. I wish I would have, because I probably would have liked the film. And to me, it probably, looking back, this film, definitely should have been the last one. Because to me, he came full circle. Even the name, I think they should have titled it John Rambo, and that was its original title. But for some reason, Stallone didn't want us to think this was going to be the last entry. And looking back, Stallone should have changed his mind and said this was going to be the last one for good. Kind of like with Rocky Balboa. That should have really been the last Rocky film, because that film definitely ended the series at the time, at least the Rocky series, on a very good note, very high note. He was able to do what he had to do and show that he still had what it takes to fight in the ring and even go up against a very younger opponent. Just to show that he can still go toe to toe. Despite the fact that he's very old and stuff like that. So yeah, it showed that he still had the courage and the ability to keep putting himself in the effort, to show that he still had what it takes to, still fight at his age, Because it's funny how he kind of revitalized the franchise, because the previous entries were not exactly, received well critically or even with audiences, especially on the fifth Rocky film. Nobody seemed to like that one. Everyone seems to hate that one. It's not a perfect film, but I don't hate Rocky 5, so... but yeah, at least Stallone admitted that he wanted to at least have the character go out on a high note, and to me that's what I felt like Rocky Balboa did, and I felt like this is what Rambo did. The character went out on a very good note, became full circle, which I'll eventually get to. I'll definitely get to the crew and the cast. And not only that, Stallone not only starred in the film, he actually wrote and directed this film. He had another writer co-write with him. His name is Art Monterastelli, I guess is how you pronounce his name. This time you have some new producers, because, Buzz Fetishance was probably no longer involved, and it had been 20 years since the last Rambo film, because the last one before that was, like, in '88, and this film came out January of 2008. I'm still kicking myself for not giving this film a chance and seeing it in theaters. I definitely would have loved it. There's some good action sequences, there's at least some characters that are relatable and you give a shit about. Whereas in the last one, you really don't give a shit for most of them, so... and they're barely there. But yeah, back to the crew, you have Ivy Lerner, who's one of the new producers. You have Kevin Keane Templeton and John Thompson as one of the new producers. And apparently, after Carolco Pictures, went bankrupt, the rights to the Rambo franchise were in fact sold to Miramax back in '97, since Carolco was pretty much gone, and they were the ones that held on to the franchise for a good while, because they were probably going to be doing a fourth one at one point, but nothing ever happened. Hell, even Miramax were even trying to produce a fourth film with Stallone, but he was apparently unmotivated to reprise the role. And eventually the rights were even sold to New Image and Millennium Films in 2005, even though technically both the Weinstein brothers are credited as producers, so they had some involvement in it. But anyway, you sliced it. I'm glad they got this fourth one. They got where we get the fourth one filmed and completed, and very glad that we got this, because, like I said before, it was a great way for the character to end, and voila. Anywho, in addition to Stallone, you have new cast members. You have Julie Benz. She's one of the missionary. Part of the missionary group that's there to kind of help very poor villages that are are malnourished and have a lack of education. We're living in some not some great environments, and being part of a war zone that's prone to being attacked by basically the plot revolves around these how should I put it, these renegade soldiers that are just that often evoke evoke fear and violence towards innocents. Like his soldiers are basically sadistically, slaughtering innocents, abducting teenage boys to be drafted into his army, and basically they actually have women being held hostage to be raped as sex slaves or even killed, and yeah, it's pretty vicious. And it's portrayed by a villain that actually doesn't really speak any English. But in addition, you also have, I'm kind of getting off topic here, but you also have Paul Schulze as Michael Burnett as part of the missionary group. You have the mercenaries that come in later, and one of them is portrayed by Matthew Marsden as Schoolboy. You have Greta McTavish as Lewis, Tim Kaine as Enjo, Rey Gallegos as Diaz. You have Jake Botz as Reese. Our main villain is Maung Maung Khin as Major Pa Tent. He does fairly decent. He does a good job as the vicious villain that you want to hate to some degree. And so basically, there's some time, Rambo, 20 years later, he's basically living enough in Thailand, making a meager living as a snake catcher, and providing boat rides to to the locals, and even maybe some people that are, touring that part of the area. And then apparently a missionary doctor from Colorado, which is Michael Burnett, basically hires Rambo to kind of use the boat to ferry their group to the Salween River into Burma, basically on a humanitarian mission to provide, medical aid, education, kind of education of religion, and basically, just to give them kind of a, basically a new lease on life to some degree, and at least to help, villages that are enduring just such in poor conditions, pretty much. And so, and Rambo initially kind of refuses, kind of still dealing with the fact that he is alone, mourning the death of his friend, Trautman. And then apparently he eventually gives in whenever he's eventually persuaded by Michael's wife, Sarah, and eventually he agrees to take him to the Burma, even though he tells him that it's a war zone and you'll be even lucky if you even get in there alive or even leave there alive. So that's how much of a war zone that is. And during the trip, during their way there, apparently they're stopped by these pirates that they actually demand Sarah in exchange for passage and even money. And even though Rambo tries to convince them that we'll give you money, just leave her alone, they refuse. And they keep refusing. And eventually Rambo was actually to take one of his guns, and he takes him out like that in a very good sequence right there. Considering that probably at the time he was in his late 50s, he still showed that he had it. So it's a pretty cool scene. However, this action kind of disgusts Michael because of their, I guess because of his religion, and he basically no longer wants his help once they get to their destination. And then it shows them, they providing the aid to the people of the village, but eventually sooner or later the village is attacked by 10 soldiers. The army strikes and villagers are massacred, and some of the missionaries are abducted. But a good part of their children, you see them being killed, and you even see them being thrown into the fire, which is pretty vicious. And then you see some of the women being raped and whatnot, just to show how vicious and cruel these people are. And eventually one of I forget the guy that carries character, one of them, Ken Howard, I guess, is the guy that approaches Rambo and tells him the news, and basically later is able to somehow get a hold of these new mercenaries. Basically, they're on their way to try to rescue all the local villagers and the people from the missionary group, and they apparently realize that the mercenaries eventually realize there's 100 of these soldiers, and they actually see these the soldiers drop back where the village was attacked. They try to play this little game that they like to play by throwing mines into the small areas, kind of like in a pond-like area, and make the people walk through them, and hopefully they die from it. And if they don't die, they'll eventually shoot them. But luckily, Rambo, since he tagged along with the mercenaries, he's able to use his bow and arrow and kill all the soldiers, and eventually aids the mercenary team. They're able to make their way into the 10th soldiers camp, and they stealthily rescue all the American missionaries and some of the the local village hostages, and they flee under the cover of the night. And eventually, Rambo's trying to track down Sarah. They were supposed to meet at a certain time. Most of them leave. It's this main British private, I guess, or captain, or the one that's the leader, because they eventually leave because they were supposed to meet at a certain time. And Rambo's able to locate Sarah, but luckily Schoolboy is actually still there and helps him out. He actually took out somebody that was almost going to take out Sarah, and Rambo was trying to duck and cover for her. And luckily, Schoolboy kills those two, and eventually they are able to escape the area of where they're being held. And in the next morning, apparently, Tent and his soldiers pursue them, trying to catch, and they actually do eventually catch most of the missionary survivors, including some of the local villagers, except for Sarah, Rambo, and Schoolboy. And they realize that there's actually, and once again, Rambo was able to stealthily take out some of the people that were, that he was able to launch a surprise attack by taking out some of the people, like planting basically a lunar section of their army into a particular place where he's able to steal a British tall boy bomb left over from World War II, and it kills a good portion of the army. And it's, there's stuff like that. Then apparently Rambo is able to sneak behind this one guy behind the Jeep mounted with the M2 Browning machine gun by cutting off his head, I think it was. And he's able to ignite a massive shootout on all the 10 soldiers. And some of the people, some of his men were also coming in by boat. He's able to take them out on there. And then eventually, despite all that, there's still a lot of 10 soldiers, and some of the mercenaries are fighting as well too. Even Michael gets in on a kill himself to defend himself. And eventually, I take that back. Eventually, the Karen rebels, which is led by Mint, who actually was one of the point men to help the mercenaries earlier. He's able to arrive with some more rebels, and they're able to overwhelm 10 soldiers and kill them. And Tent, realizing his defeat, tries to escape, but somehow Rambo intercepts him, stabs him, disembowels him with his machete, and basically he sees that pretty much all the people are okay, and both Rambo and Sarah exchange looks, and even Michael kind of looks himself. And then eventually, sometime later, Rambo returns to the United States, to his father's home in Bowie, Arizona, which is where he said he was from, and that's pretty much where the film ends. He's able to come home finally. So basically, what can I say about this film? I overall really enjoyed it. I think Stallone did a good job, considering the fact that he wrote and directed this film. The violence is really taken up quite a bit. It's pretty graphic. It's pretty violent too, because you actually, like I said before, you see these the tense men, doing some pretty serious and cruel and inhumane things, like tossing children into fires and stuff like that, raping women. And hell, there's a scene where basically all the men are watching these girls dance, and they're just throwing things at them, and then they go on the stage and actually rape them and actually assault them, just to show how really vicious and cruel they are. So yeah, it shows just how mean and inhumane these villains are, especially Tent himself. Like, he even orders his men, like in the very beginning of the film, there's these villagers that they kidnap, and they're in this kind of field, but it has a little bit of water in there. And you see these guys tossing these mines, and basically his men ordered them to go in there to crawl in there or something like that. And then one of them ends up hitting the mine. They blow up, and I guess since they didn't hit the other mine, I don't think they did. They basically just shoot them, just to have a game of it, just to show how cruel and inhumane these these people in Burma are. And yeah, the flaw to this film is that there is a flaw, but I wish I would have seen Rambo have a more of a battle between him and Tent. That would have been cool, because all he does was he just stabbed him in the gut and disemboweled him, and his intestines fell off, and that's pretty much it for him. So, sorry, my nose is itching. I just wish they would have showed a little bit of a battle between them, and yeah, I think that's mainly the one flaw I have with it. But anyway, you slice it, for the most part, I really do enjoy this film. It's not perfect. Maybe I feel like the editing was maybe a little more amateurish, because apparently there is an extended cut that's about 8 minutes longer, because the film is not really long. And to be honest, all the Rambo films are not really that long. They're usually an hour and a half or so. This is not the shortest, but it's pretty close, I think. And maybe some of those 8 minutes may have delved a little bit more into the character, or delved more into Rambo, maybe losing Trautman, since the actor himself, Richard Crenna, had already died at this point. In fact, I believe the film was dedicated to his memory, so it was good that they dedicated the film. They even used flashbacks and some of the footage intercutted with in this film whenever Rambo's having this little dream, and I thought they did that very well. So basically, the flaws I can see was probably I wish there would have been a little more of a battle between Rambo and the villain, and at times the editing is maybe a little more amateurish. But the good news is there's no shaky cam. The action sequences are well done. I like how Rambo was able to dispatch those pirates pretty easily with his handgun, and then when Rambo actually plants that little bomb trap, I guess apparently it's a British cowboy bomb left from World War II. He kills a good part of Tent's army, and it has a pretty solid explosion, killing a good people. It causes this explosion that is able to knock some wind, kind of throw off Rambo a little bit, even though he ran as fast as he could away from there. So, and plus, I love how he killed this one guy by, I think he sliced off his head, and I like how he's able to take out. I like how Rambo stealthily was able to take out some of the Tent's men and rescue the local survivors and the missionary people. And the mercenaries did a good job too, especially the character of Schoolboy. He was kind of a likable character. He was able to help Rambo. He took out two of those guys that were going to kill Sarah originally, but then they were probably going to kill Rambo if he didn't, take him out since he's the sniper and stuff like that. And plus, the big action sequence was like the last 5-10 minutes where he had the big ass M2 Browning machine gun where he's just shooting at people, killing them, and the most gruesome. There's even the people in the army trucks, and just Rambo just shoots at them, and it just bullets exploding. It looks pretty good, looks practical. I guess the CGI, there was probably CGI used a little bit here and there, but it still looked pretty good compared to what you see recently. But yeah, all the practical effects for when they're there, they look pretty good. Hell, even at least the supporting characters are decent, and at least they had a reason for trying to go there to try to help people. It shows that the supporting characters like Sarah Miller, which is played by Julie Benz, and even Matt and Paul Schulze, I guess, Sarah and Michael, they're at least likable. They have a goal. They want to be selfless. They want to show that they are trying to help people, in these rough and poor and in these rough, rigid, kind of poor areas that, have very little food and, very little, probably no medical attention. It just shows how you can at least have relatable characters and at least give a shit. Because to me, in the fifth one, there was really hardly any supporting characters that I can really care less about, besides Rambo. But yeah, overall the supporting characters do well. The action sequences, the gunfight scenes are very well done. The film definitely had a budget. The budget, from what I read, is $50 million. And let's see, The cinematography was pretty decent because it was filmed in a jungle. It was actually filmed in, I think they said it was filmed in Thailand and actually filmed in Mexico and a little bit in the United States. So, yeah, they actually used the locations pretty well, especially Thailand, since it was pretty similar to what they used probably for the second Rambo. I think they filmed a little bit in Thailand, but I think they filmed a lot of it in Mexico, so it would serve as the backdrop for Thailand. Or, sorry, Vietnam. What am I thinking? Vietnam and the second one, so. They actually had a good budget, had good cinematography. Even the score, despite the fact that Jerry Goldsmith did not come back, Brian Tyler actually was able to capture the essence of Rambo's themes, in the very beginning, like the long way home and stuff like that. And while the film didn't exactly, have one-liners, I like how the film also kind of came back to its dramatic element, like it did with First Blood, because you didn't exactly have all the awesome one-liners like this one did, but it did have one good line. He's like, "Live for something," or no, sorry, live for nothing, die for something. So he had a very good quote in that. And people were saying that, I remember back then people were complaining that Stallone wasn't given a good performance. Oh, he doesn't give a shit. Well, in the very beginning, Rambo doesn't really give a shit because, lots happened. The people that he knew, even Trautman's gone, and apparently he has not seen his father since he was drafted in the Vietnam War, since he was 17. So, yeah. I like how we kind of get a little bit of info on his background, even though it was kind of vague. And I wish we would have seen, Rambo's father in the fifth one, where it could have involved a scene in that, but unfortunately, sadly, we never got that, so it kind of sucks. But anyway you slice it, Stallone did fine. He was great. He wrote, directed this film. It showed that he has, a good capability of writing the character, giving it some depth, and creating some villains that are pretty vicious. And yeah, he really showed that he had the talent to do that. I don't know about now. He technically wrote the fifth one, but I feel like he's starting to kind of fade out and he's not putting as much effort to me as he did like 10, 15 years ago. Because it seems like to me he gave a shit and wanted to end the character on a good note, and so that the character can return home and come full circle. Because we actually see by the end, apparently Sarah kind of got to him and said, there's a chance for him to kind of go home and, reconnect with, some living relatives, especially his father and stuff like that, which sadly we never got to see, which I would have liked to have seen. But yeah, it's kind of nice that we get to see what a semblance of where Rambo lived. They try to kind of expand on that, but they don't really expand it in the way you wanted to in the fifth one, because you don't hear really much about his father in the fifth one, if hardly at all. I feel like I'm not giving this the best review, but I feel like I'm doing a fairly good job. I feel like I trying to sum this film up as best I can. It's just a really entertaining but yet somewhat dramatic film that at least you hope for Rambo to really overcome his demons and help people like he always does, even though he may not seem like it at first, but eventually he will, because he is human, and he has that ability to give a shit about others, because he has that selfless ability to help people, kind of like what these people were doing here. I felt like you can connect with Rambo once again and show that Stallone has what it takes to kind of give this character a full circle story, and I feel like in the fourth one it did. He basically helped people yet again, saved a lot of people, and in the end he came back home where he belonged, and that's that. And I don't know what else to say other than that. I think it's a good film, and it closed the series nicely, and I think you definitely should give it a chance if you haven't seen it yet. It definitely ends the franchise, and to me, it should have stopped here. Definitely shouldn't have the fifth one. for sure. Even though Stallone wasn't bad in that one, this one to me felt like it should have been the end, and that's where it should have closed. And if you're going to do a fifth one, at least, have something involving Rambo's father. Hell, even try to even have, the Dennehy character kind of make amends for what he did. So I think they should have done something like that, but that's just me. Anywho, it's got some good action sequences. Stallone delivers. Kind of a few nitpicks, but they're not necessarily bothersome. It's worth it. If it's for cheap, buy it. If it's available, I believe it's available on YouTube for rent. If you want to, go for it. Give it a watch. I think you'll like it. So yeah, I did. So, anywho, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to do the fifth review next because the game's about to start in about 20-something minutes. So yeah, if the game, becomes unwatchable, I'll probably do a review of the fifth Rambo film. And that's going to be somewhat of a rant, not a raging rant or anything like that, but just kind of a underwhelming, disappointing kind of rant for the fifth one. So yeah. Anywho, I'd rather end it here, and hopefully you like this review. Hopefully you like what I said, and give this video a thumbs up, and feel free to stay tuned for more reviews. As I keep grinding these things out, and hopefully you like them. So, all right, folks, I'll see you later. Later.